Just before we get to the subject that you all want to talk about, I just want to say that we have 20 trucks out on the roads. We appreciate everybody that has been patient and been slow. We feel very good about where we are, but just continue to remind people that it is February in Syracuse, which means that there is snow, and sometimes that can make the going a little bit slow. So we'd ask everyone to be patient and to remember that as they get out and drive on our roads. But we have all of our equipment on the roads, and by all accounts, everything is going as we would expect it to go. So, 20 trucks, yes, 20, 20 trucks. So I want to thank you all for coming here this afternoon. National Public Radio delivered it.
Well done.
Yes. Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I was out of town last week when the Consensus Commission released a report, and that's why I wasn't able to talk to the electronic media. I want to thank the Commission for their hard work and their good intentions, and as many of you know, throughout this process I have met with them. My administration has cooperated with them. When they issued their draft report, they specifically asked me and other elected officials to refrain on commenting on it until there had been a series of hearings about their draft recommendations. When they came out with their final report, I thought it was important for me as the mayor of the city to issue a statement on the report. And as I said when they issued it, despite the Commission's good intentions, the Consensus Commission's final report is unfortunately an enormous disappointment. It is rife with ambiguities and omissions, and its section on governance is fatally flawed since it assumes the existence of legal authority to abolish the city, which simply does not exist. City staff actively participated in the process with the understanding that the recommendations would meaningfully address the issues of inequity and better delivery of services. Instead, sadly, we were presented with a document that abolishes the city, strips the cities of its assets, and saddles city residents with enormous financial obligations without any means to raise revenues to satisfy those obligations. And indeed, it resembles a plan for the worst form of corporate looting without any means to raise revenues to satisfy them. It is a document that is not designed to meet the needs of Central New York residents in general and the residents of the city of Syracuse in particular. While not addressing the issue of school district consolidation, the implementation of the report's recommendations would cripple the ability of the school district to fulfill its mandate to educate future generations. And in short, it would doom residents and property owners in the city of Syracuse to eternal poverty. Its proposed new governance structure would dilute and disenfranchise people of color and other traditionally underrepresented groups at a time when greater participation in our civic process is to be encouraged rather than diminished. It is for those reasons that the voters of the city of Syracuse entrusted me with the sacred obligation to exercise my best judgment. And as such, to endorse this proposal would be a dereliction of duty on my part. And for these reasons and others, I will be urging my fellow residents to actively oppose any initiative to adopt its recommendations. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Well, maybe you could start with the Consensus Commission says that they would actually give the city, in the newly formed, I don't know what they would call it, the legislature, whatever the legislative body would be called, that the city would actually have more representation on that.
That's, you know, I think that that's sophistry at its best. You are wiping away an entire city government. You're taking away all of the city assets, and then you're saddling the city, which includes property owners, which includes voters, business owners, with all the debt, which is over $1 billion when you look at our general municipal debt, and then when you look at our obligations from our pensions and health care. Over $1 billion that will be saddled with property owners here and no ability to raise revenue. When you do that, what you are doing is saying to people who want to buy property in the city of Syracuse, who want to sell property in the city of Syracuse, that it has an enormous debt associated with it without any ability to raise revenue.
And I guess the other topic they would bring up is, it came up during their meeting that it wasn't determined yet who could, if this went forward, and there's ifs, like on top of ifs, but if it went forward, that what they refer to as the executive, they said it hadn't yet been decided who that could be, and they said it could be the mayor of the city of Syracuse. Who would that
Oh,
be?
sure. I mean, theoretically, it could be Donald Trump if he came in here and established residency in Onondaga County. But when you are taking away all of the assets of the city of Syracuse, and then you're saying to the school district, well, you guys will float in some sort of miasma that we'll figure out later, you're clearly saying that this is going to be a government that is structured differently and abolishes the city of Syracuse.
But the city would have to, from what I understand, would remain to deal with the school district, because there has to be that entity that, handles the school district.
Well, you say that, Ellen, but what I'm telling you is that based on the report and the draft and final report, there's nothing in writing that says that. What they say is that they will abolish the city, strip all of its assets, and then leave its liabilities with the debt district. And so what happens to the school district, which is by definition attached to the city of Syracuse? They don't answer that question. What happens to the city's debt for the Joint Schools Construction Board, or all the money that we raise for schools in order to revitalize schools? And again, we're looking at last week, we had the great announcement that we had the highest graduation rate in 10 years. So we're clearly making progress in our school district. We have finished the Joint Schools Construction Project, the first full revitalization. We're moving to the second phase of that. There are a lot of good projects that are going on that this would just stop in its tracks with no discernible answer, but most importantly, no advocate. Who's going to advocate for the school district to get their correct share of funding if it is an organization that has no head? By definition, and that's what this does. Every other school district in Onondaga County would have a head of it to advocate, to go to Albany, to do all of those things. When you have a dependent school district, by definition, the mayor becomes the head of the bully pulpit to argue for that, as I have done repeatedly throughout my career.
So where do you go from here? Because this is obviously the first time this has been attempted. Can you stop and say to them, no, this doesn't work, we're gonna have to come up with a different option? Or do you take a legal recourse with this? Where do you go?
Well, look, I think you heard the community, when they issued their draft report, say very loudly and clearly that they were not happy with the recommendations. I think what happens next is that there will be a discussion, people are going to ask, how did you come up with this? When you say that this helps us with economic development, I can tell you that one of the examples they cite is Louisville, and there's a professor named Professor Savage who's done a number of studies on Louisville, who says when you do consolidations, you do not end up having better economic development, but most importantly, they end up costing more money, not less. Every consolidation that I have ever seen has ended up costing taxpayers more money, not less. And there are people from Cornell who will tell you that. There are experts like Professor Savage from Louisville who will tell you that. All you have to do is look around it, because, among other things, everybody rises to a higher pay level. And so this idea that you can just take two budget lines from two budgets that have similar titles and combine them and say that you can get a savings is just not, it just doesn't work that way in government.
Wouldn't this also, if it were to go to referendum, wouldn't the voters ultimately decide this in the city, county, wherever it's, I assume it would go to county voters?
It would. It's my understanding, based on legal opinion that I've gotten across the state, that in order for this to go to the voters, it would have to have a home rule resolution by the city council or the county or the county legislature.
Well, doesn't it also depend on whether the legislation the governor's proposing goes through and allow the county to?
The proposal that the governor has made through his budget is distinct from what consensus has brought forward. So that proposal, as drafted, effectively says in order for municipalities to get any money from the state, they have to sit down with their county and come up with a savings plan and then put that in front of a referendum for the voters. And what I can tell you is that, a number of years ago, I think 2 years ago, the governor himself stood up at his State of the State and commended me and the county executive for working together on shared services and consolidations and doing it effectively. So I have really a track record of doing this, and I know how it's done, and it's not done by mandating from the top down or threatening people.
And that situation is not working
Well,
That
look,
was
there's,
2 years ago, so.
there are, well, I don't know, I mean, our purchasing department is consolidated and that's working. There are other, we are working together on the implementation of information technology and PeopleSoft, so there are lots of examples where it is working. But I would also tell you that the towns and villages, several towns and villages have approached me over my tenure as mayor and asked me for shared services for different arrangements that we've been working on as well.
Are there other parts to this? I mean, obviously, the big one is the merger consolidation, but are there other recommendations in the report that, you know, the city and the county can do?
Well, I guess, sure, what I would say to you, though, is that the best way to answer that is sort of like saying, well, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I mean, you know, the problem with how this has been set forth is that you are using a big stick to mandate these cost savings. And what you're saying to people who are working every day to serve their constituents, that if you get together and do shared services, it will be seen as a pretext and the first step towards taking you over. And that's not the message that you want to send when you want to have efficiency of services. So are there recommendations in there that are worth pursuing? Of course there are, but I'm not sure that there are partners anymore who want to do that, given how these recommendations have been set forth. And given also what the governor has said and done.
Former Congressman Walsh noted in a presentation after it, he said, you know, the city, you know, fundamentally there's a problem of due to the amount of tax exempt property in the city. The city's limited by how much it can collect in property taxes. I think he used the number $30 million a year, and then applied that to the city's budget of roughly $160 million a year. Former Congressman saying that was not sustainable long term, and that this was just, you know, whatever, if we aren't doing something, we're kicking the can down the road. How would you respond to that?
You know, I think that there have been different goals that have been mentioned for consensus. First, it was said we're going to do consensus to have better government efficiency. Then it was said we're going to do consensus to cut property taxes. Then it was done because, you know, that we're all failing governments and we're all not sustainable. So first I would say, what is the goal? Because if the goal is, for example, to reduce property taxes, then all you need to do is look towards Albany and see that the property taxes are mandates, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's pensions, healthcare, binding interest arbitration. Mildred Warner from Cornell University has said New York State is #2 in sending costs down to its localities. The other issue about sustainability, I would tell you that Albany is already on the verge of bankruptcy. The mayor last year said if they didn't get $12.5 million, that they were going to go bankrupt. This year she's saying the same thing. You have Nassau County, which is already in a financial control board. The city of Buffalo has been in and out of a financial control board. So what do they all have in common? New York State is our government. So I think that our issue of sustainability is a reflection of economic development policy that has not worked for all of upstate New York, frankly, for lots of corners of New York State. When 1 out of every 2 children born in the city of Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse is born into poverty, that shows that we have a statewide problem.
You suggested this is all political. I assume you're talking about the governor. Do you stand by that? Who is behind this? Who do you think?
What I have said is that I think that there are certain people who are pushing this, and it's very clear from their public statements who those people are.
So who is that?
Well, you have to go and look at the statements.
And looking at that, consensus pushed back and said you're making something political that isn't political. Obviously, you don't buy their defense of what you said.
When, you know, when I think we all saw consensus take on a bigger role when the governor's Hunger Game proposals was announced, and that there was going to be millions of dollars made available through the Hunger Games successful competition. We won that competition. And shortly thereafter, you heard the governor say, you won that competition because you agreed to consolidate everything. And there were a number of us who said, nope, that's not accurate. Indeed, it's far from accurate. And in moving on with the URI proposal, there were lots of things that were proposed as part of that agreement that have not happened. So I think that this proposal and the people who are involved in this want to really give something back to their community, but by allowing it to become part of a discussion and part of the Hunger Games proposal and the Upstate Revitalization Initiative and State of the State proposals and State of the County proposals, that it's not, it has not, the recommendations don't benefit the people of the city of Syracuse. And that's my job as mayor, is to stand up and say what I think benefits them and what I don't think benefits them and why I think that that's the case.
The consensus chairs also, really question that move of splitting the economic development of the county. They were consolidated and they're not. They call that a move in the wrong direction to split them.
Sure.
What do you think about that?
I think that after a federal trial happens, we'll see a lot of people who will say maybe that it was the right decision. That after we have the federal trial, with what has happened in this community and the people who have been indicted in federal court, that will show and illuminate the reasons for decisions that were made.
Is any of this, considering the work that was done and over the past 3 years or so, a surprise, I guess, that they reached this conclusion?
Well, I participated. I had several meetings with the chairs of the commission. I made my administration open to them and had them participate in this. And I shared with them all along what my goals would be in terms of the issues of making sure that we addressed inequity and government efficiency and how we did that. So what surprised me is that I think what we had an ability to really talk about a better delivery of services, and instead the focus became on governmental structure.
Are there changes that you could see, is it the idea of the metropolitan government, or was it their proposal for a metropolitan government? I guess, is there a possibility that there is negotiating ground where you could meet with them on it still, or do you think it's that concept?
I think if there was negotiations or if there was a genuine discussion to have about this, it would have happened between the draft and final report, and it didn't.
So some of the people saying, the city has no choice in this whole thing, that you have to do, or towns and villages have choice. If the city had a choice, would that be something you'd be amenable to, where you could cherry pick possible metropolitan police force or the water department, that kind of thing?
Look, throughout my tenure as mayor, I have been open to new ideas, new ways of delivering services. Nothing has been off the table, but I have also been very clear about when certain arrangements don't work in the city's interest. And what I can tell you is it will not benefit the city of Syracuse to strip our assets and to leave a debt and say that, that's going to work to help us with economic development, to help us with social development, to help us with economic justice. It's just not.
Are there actions you take from here to actually prevent this from happening, or just speaking out about it?
I think that right now my primary action is as the mayor of the city. People are asking my opinion about it, and they're asking me my reasons for it, and I'm sharing it with you. And I will tell you that I have not run into any groups or sizable number of people who say that this is, this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Would you, for example, ask the council to pass a resolution against it, or anything?
I'm not really, I haven't thought about that.
If they tweaked it, because the idea of that it really would be the city, it wouldn't be abolishing the city, but essentially expanding the city, not unlike what happened in Jacksonville a little bit, where the city kind of took over a lot of an area roughly the size of Onondaga County. Would that make a difference in that it would keep some of the priority on the city, or?
I can't answer that question, because what you are proposing to me is something that, you can't opine on unless you know what the details are. But what I will tell you is that right now, the people who pay taxes in the city of Syracuse pay for city police and they pay for sheriff's police. And under this proposal, they would keep the debt associated with that, and they would lose the services of a city police department. I don't think that makes sense in a lot of different ways.
I don't really profess to understand exactly what consensus is laying out, but it sounds to me like the city would retain its current boundaries, but answer to the same government, the same executive and 33-person legislature that the county.
I think that could be a fair characterization, yeah. But I think that
Is
the,
that taxation without representation?
look, I believe it is in a lot of different ways, and it's stripping people of their voice, and that's why I don't think that this is allowed under the state constitution, that you cannot abolish a city under the state constitution. But that being said, they keep the boundary as a debt district. So let me go even further in this analogy that I gave you. So if you live in the city of Syracuse or you own property in the city of Syracuse, you pay property taxes, and right now you're paying property taxes for, among other things, to equip a police force with cameras, computers, police cars, radios. If this proposal went through, there would be no city police department, and you would continue to pay the bill for the debt for those cameras, police cars, radios, computers, and yet you wouldn't have the service.
You mean the debt in the past? Or-
Yes, yes.
So that the money you've already, I guess, loaned, got
Right,
loaned for.
that it would, now, could they also then say, well, we're just gonna continue to, put debt on you and to provide for the entire metropolitan government? Yes, they could.
So how much debt does the city of Syracuse have?
So we have, let me just look this up because everybody gets nervous when I start talking about numbers, for good reason. So our OPEB liability, which is our other post-employment benefit liability, which is healthcare, is $680 million. We currently have an outstanding general obligation debt of $472 million. So if you add those two together, you're just over $1 billion. $1 billion would stay with the properties that pay taxes in the city of Syracuse. If you have $1 billion of taxes and liabilities, $1 billion of liabilities left for those properties, who's going to buy property here? Who's going to sell property here? How are you going to expand businesses here?
So you said it would raise property taxes in the city, but not other parts of the county.
Perhaps, yeah. But what it would mean is that there would be $1 billion of liability attached to properties in the city of Syracuse that are not attached to properties outside the city of Syracuse that would be utilizing those assets, utilizing those police cars, utilizing those radios, utilizing those computers, utilizing those the water facilities, utilizing all the fire trucks, all of the things that I'm talking right now about our general obligation bond, all of our capital that we bond for every year and then we pay off every year.
There wouldn't be any more extra revenue coming in because it was a county.
There'd be no revenue. There'd be no revenue. So you can imagine also that when you went to go and get bonds for the school district, they would look at this and say, how can you do this? Well, what about the outstanding bonds that we have, we did to do Fowler High School, ITC, H.W. Smith? What happens to that debt? And then who pays for it? And how does it get assimilated? But most importantly, people elect a government to take care of services and to provide services. And the primary services that people are concerned about is education and public safety. And there are others, obviously, DPW and other services. But under this proposal, you would strip the accountability for those proposals and you'd keep all of the liability.
So to clarify, your number one opposition to this is because the city would be saddled with debt that this metropolitan government would not pay off.
I can't, what my number one opposition to this is that this would doom the city of Syracuse to eternal poverty because of stripping its assets and leaving its liabilities. But it also would take away effective advocacy for the school district and for people who live in the city of Syracuse at the time when we need more people to participate in the process, not less.
When this does go through, a lot of this will be after your regime. Is there a way for you right now to kind of say, you know what, I do not like this, we're pulling out of this completely? Or is that not possible?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you, Tom, look, you know, I'm going to be the strongest advocate that I can be for every day of the 8 years that I am given the privilege to be mayor. And that means on midnight of December 31st of 2017 at 12:01, you know, I will become a private citizen, and then I'll do my advocacy in that role. But up until that point, I'm going to do what the people of the city of Syracuse elected me to do and now expect me to do, which is to stand up and represent their interests.
What can you get out of this? Can you just say, you know what, I'm part of this?
I don't know what this is, Tom. I guess, you know,
Well, I
what
mean,
is,
they-
what is
they
this?
released this consensus report.
And I stood up and said, I'm against it. I'm against these government recommendations.
Okay, but as you say that you're against it, can you actually back the city out of it?
Well, I don't know, it's just a report right now. It's just a piece of, it's just, you know,
It's just a report.
It's just a report.
Assuming the merger goes nowhere, and this is a little bit of legal hair splitting, but, could the county go to do like a county charter referendum that says, we're gonna take over the city parks, and put that to the people without a home rule message from the city?
I don't believe so, no.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
Because that's taking a function.
Correct.
On another issue,
Sure.
one of your favorites,
Tell me.
Tom DiNapoli just released a report today about New York's aging infrastructure and concerns about contamination.
Do you realize, Ellen, you were this was going to be the first press conference that I got through without talking about infrastructure. So you can all blame Ellen for that.
Anyway,
Talk dirty to me, Ellen. Talk to me about infrastructure.
he's using Syracuse as the example of all this. I mean, are we the poster child for burst pipes? I mean, does that make
No.
you happy?
No, we're not, but we are the poster child for talking about infrastructure and the importance that it has. And you know, I made a very clear decision a number of years ago to talk about our infrastructure, talk about how important it was to economic development, talk about how important it was to the function of our society and what we should be doing. We should be doing more of it. And since that time, there have been other government officials who have gotten on board and started talking about it. So believe me, there are plenty of YouTube videos with New York City having these incredible water main breaks, drowning subway systems. I was invited to New Jersey maybe 2 or 3 months ago to keynote a conference that they were having on water. So infrastructure in our deteriorating infrastructure is a national issue. John Oliver did a section on it in his HBO show. Everybody's talking about it. Look, I'm pleased to be associated with the solution of it. As again, you know, I've said to my staff multiple times over my tenure here is we don't run away from our problems, we run towards them.
The issue though, is really comes down to money, and does New York State have enough money to be able to, I mean, the numbers, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but what you're getting and what you need to fix things is like nowhere.
Except, right, except, Ellen, that we here in Syracuse have been headlining new technologies and new solutions, using data, using technology, showing that we can be much more efficient and we can get a lot more done with less money. And so what we've done here in Syracuse is say, you are operating under an old paradigm when you say, you know, it costs $1 million a foot for a water main. We're looking at it and saying, you can buy sensors, you can have technology that reads the data, you can exercise your valves, all of these, you can treat your streets with a different treatment that will extend the life of your streets. So using data and technology, there's a lot of good work that can be done with infrastructure for a lot less money than people traditionally think. And part of our next challenge and what we've been talking about a lot across the country is how innovation can shave the costs of infrastructure maintenance and repair.
Do we know what it shaved the cost to? We used to talk about 700 million, I think, right?
Yeah, well, it's an apples and oranges comparison because that was and I said this at the time, that was like a back of the envelope figure. But now, you know, we're looking at sensors, and different treatments and, kind of minimizing road cuts and working with our private partners to do, Dig Once initiatives. So we're also looking at the different treatments that we have for roads to see if we can extend the life of those roads. And our first measurements of that will be available this spring after the winter's over to see how they, survive that. So, yeah, we're making progress in that section.
What about consolidating a city water system in the county and the metropolitan, and that's a consensus item too. I mean, if you're for all this, why aren't you for that?
Well, because I don't want to saddle the debt of the people in the city of Syracuse to pay for that alone. If it's, and also, I will tell you that there is no department that is more accountable and provides better service than our water department. And people have asked me before, I've had people come in and say, oh, well, hedge funds have come in and said, we'll buy your water system for you, and then it won't be your problem anymore. And what I have said to them in response is, I want it to be my problem so that people know that they can call somebody and say, hey, I can't get water in my, to make my breakfast in the morning. How long is it going to take me to get water? And in the city of Syracuse that we have a rule that says we'll try to get it on within 24 hours. Most often, it's much less time than that, but we have people working continuously. It doesn't matter if it's a huge snowstorm. We'll have people in the middle of the roads digging it up to fix the problem. If you have a different entity that owns that, that accountability becomes less important. All right?
And do you have any comment on the core lawsuit?
No, we're, examining all of our options.
What are your options?
To appeal it, to not appeal it.
You know how long it's going to take you to do that?
No, I don't. Anybody else? All right, thank you.